I have bad news. Your son is a gamer now.
For my birthday in 2002, I received a purple Game Boy Advance, my very first new game system. Now, considering the rest of my family lived an hour away from me, I think my parents knew I needed some backseat entertainment to get through the car rides every weekend. And after spitting milk in my lap fell through, I guess this was the next best option, and the game I got with it was SpongeBob SquarePantis Legend of the Lost Spatula for Game Boy Color. Let me tell you, as a kid, you're not always privy to what's considered a good game. Neither are your parents. And as a mother, I don't know why you'd buy your kid this anyways. So, back in the day, licensed games based on properties you already like were like lice.
I got him.
As a child, I liked SpongeBob. If you will, I was a SpongeBob a sponge a That was my show. Everybody had their show, so don't go making fun of me when your show was goddamn skunk foo. I watched every episode, consumed everything I possibly could revolving around the franchise for the longest time, until that fateful day when I realized the show hadn't been good for years. But those early years, there ain't nothing like it. And hey, this game released during that era. In fact, it's the first SpongeBob game ever. Can you tell? Yeah, even back then, I could tell this was pretty rudimentary. It was hard to unconditionally love this thing simply due to being based on the show I watched when it was so dull and awkward. It's confusing as hell, too. It's oftentimes hard to know where to go and what to do. The game is non-linear in its design and revolves around exploring levels to find items to help us progress, which, hey, they could have just made this a SpongeBob calendar. Props to them for going above and beyond. All right, when do I start bitching again?
Well, if only they made this a SpongeBob calendar, I would know!
The screen is so zoomed in and SpongeBob jumps so high and stiff that it's beyond annoying to get anywhere, especially when so much of the level design revolves around platforms in the air off the screen. But the developers found a great method to teach players what to do here. They put various enemies in line with your jumping height off screen. That'll teach you to play our game. I never got far in this one as a kid. I honestly would only play it to mess around in some of the levels, maybe look at the main menu since it reminded me of the show. I may have played this a lot back in the day, but by that I mean I let it happen to me. Just a crummy little kid's game, that's all this is. It isn't unacceptable or egregious, it's just completely worthless if you aren't a 6-year-old SpongeBob fan in 2001. I was 5 in 2002.
Damn it!
Just because I had a Game Boy now didn't mean I stopped tinkering with the PC. Over there, I had another licensed SpongeBob title, this one being Employee of the Month. Man, I played this one so many times. It's a point-and-click adventure game, though I think calling this an adventure is pushing it. As well as game, you point and click here. This is about as interactive as QuickBooks. But considering the target demographic for this,
I'm stupid.
it makes sense how simple, straightforward, and short this one is. And to be fair, that made it ripe for replays. If I had an hour or two to kill on a lazy summer afternoon, I'd plowed through this because why not? Certain aspects always resonated with me. The sound effects, locations, items you collected, public nudity, all things you just remember as a kid. So replaying it today, while I definitely enjoyed myself, it wasn't because this was an ideal experience. Just goes to show how much nostalgia can affect your perception of things, which is perfectly fine. I think it's totally reasonable to like something just because you grew up with it. However, when you fail to see any flaws and can't comprehend why nobody else likes it,
Well, that's because you're right.
makes me scared to death to say anything bad about any horrible, stupid, fucking dumbass piece of garbage this game kind of game you might have grown up with. I don't want to offend you. When it was time for me to get a new GameCube game, I picked up, take a wild damn guess, SpongeBob SquarePantis Battle for Bikini Bottom. Yet another licensed game. Yet another Nickelodeon game. Yet another SpongeBob game. I bet you're saying, I predict the next game he owned was Suikoden 5. Well, Battle for Bikini Bottom really spoke to me, as it had SpongeBob on the front. I think I just saw a SpongeBob thing, I wanted a SpongeBob thing, but by God, out of all SpongeBob things, this was the SpongeBob thing. Behold, Scott's greatest accomplishment, convincing his mom to buy this for him. Because I genuinely cannot imagine my childhood without this game. I know that sounds silly about this, especially considering how the other SpongeBob games I played weren't all too great, but this was special. A 3D platformer, not unlike Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, but this was SpongeBob. This was SpongeBob's world. I was transported into my favorite show as a kid, which I think emphasizes how important licensed games can be if done properly. The levels here were so big and lovingly crafted to be incredibly faithful interpretations of locations from the source material. I remember exploring SpongeBob's house and neighborhood by themselves for hours, voicing the characters to craft my own cartoon in real time. I would pop a blank VHS tape into the VCR, hook up my GameCube, and record everything, trying to control the game smoothly enough and not skip cutscenes so I would have my own little SpongeBob episode. This was the perfect game for a SpongeBob fan in the 2000s, and a good game in its own right. Like I said, it's pretty much Mario 64, but SpongeBob. Golden spatulas are linked to various objectives throughout an area. Do them to progress throughout the game. Pretty simple, but very effective execution. There's a reason anybody born in 1997 won't shut the hell up about this game, though they really should sometimes. I've seen fellow lovers of this game beg others to give it a try. Others being people who barely ever watched the show and were 40 years old. Why bother with that request? Just cut to the chase and ask him to tell you this thing you love sucks. When this game got a remake in 2020, a whole lot of people went, I don't get it. And I understand where they're coming from, but also not at the same time. On one hand, this game isn't anything groundbreaking. It's a clone of Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. However, that hasn't stopped other games from being lauded. To expect anything more out of this game than what it is, a solid 3D platformer for kids based on SpongeBob, well, I think that's on you, not the game. I have heard some fans say this is one of the greatest games of all time, and I would agree. When I was 6, I wouldn't say it's aged poorly at all. Rather, what made this so amazing at the time was experiencing it as a kid. Nowadays, it's easy to see a good kids game, harder to see anything more than that, especially if you didn't play it back then. But come on, it's fully voiced with colorful, detailed visuals, great fitting music, solid level design, controls, a good length. How can you look at this and think it's just another licensed kids game from the 2000s? Like, am I insane? I've always thought this looked leagues better than similar titles at the time. The boss fights, man, the epic music is etched into my mind, especially the final one. Seriously, one of the coolest last levels out there. You defeat the giant robot SpongeBob, then go inside him for a mix of a platforming gauntlet and ultimate showdown, with the very last bit asking you to use your homing cruise bubble missile attack to destroy these 3 units of the robot's brain. This is so damn cool. I would boot the game up just to replay the final boss constantly. Though this was something that always bugged me. You couldn't replay like any of the other objectives. Once you beat the game, there's nothing for you to do when you return to these areas. Though that did encourage me to make my own fun by running around. This game changed me, man. It got me to pick up my first memory card. For a few weeks there, I would just play the opening bit over and over again without saving. It got me to try 100%ing a game back then. I nabbed 93 out of the 100 golden spatulas and maxed out my currency to the point where when I would collect more, no sound effects would play. It got me to bring a video game instruction manual to school to thumb through as a book.
It got me punched in the face.
And it got me to beg for the same damn game 3 times in a row. Yes, of course I had to get Battle for Bikini Bottom for PC as well. I just love this game so much. I just had to play it there and there. You know, that's good enough. Now, PC versions of console games are normally the same deal, but that's not the case for titles aimed at children. This is a completely different experience. I guess a lot of kids were in the same boat as me when it came to their relationship with the PC. It's one of your first gaming experiences, and it's on what dad doesn't do his taxes on. You're probably not gonna have the motor skills to control a game like this with a keyboard and mouse, let alone own a USB game controller. So it just made sense for this to be a completely different point-and-click minigame collection.
I mean, this was how I learned what wisdom was.
This thing reuses nearly all of its assets from Employee of the Month, thank God. But it's now a minigame collection based around pointing and clicking with the mouse. I mean, the general premise is the same as the console game, but that's it. Robots have overtaken Bikini Bottom, but you sure as hell wouldn't know that by playing it. These games all feel so disconnected. It's just a bunch of random ideas loosely tied together via SpongeBob trying to find his friends and save the city. But does this minigame make me feel like I'm doing a damn thing to save the city? Feels like I'm doing SpongeBob's laundry. This was probably either developed as a completely different game that got a reskin to fit the theme of the console game, or was cobbled together right quick to get a PC skew of the game out in time. Either way, much like Employee of the Month, I played this a ton. I do appreciate how this was different from what came before and the console game, and as basic as these minigames were, they kept my attention, though I feel the sound effects played a massive role in my satisfaction here. There was just something so pleasing about it all. It's hard to explain. But what's even harder to explain is the third goddamn version of this game I owned. Battle for Bikini Bottom on Game Boy Advance. For some reason, when I got this game, I envisioned it being the PC game running on my Game Boy. The thought of playing this in the car? Oh, but when I finally popped it in, I learned a valuable lesson that day.
I should take a bath.
Yeah, this is just a pretty basic 2D platformer. I played it, but it was never a huge favorite of mine. Honestly, my greatest memory with this was inputting random things on the password screen when I was bored and guessing the code for the final boss. That was one of my finest moments as a user of Skin. I'm naming my kid this. Now, around this era of my childhood, I recall really harnessing my creativity like never before and truly making something. Friends. Now, back then, making friends was smooth sailing. All you had to do was look at somebody funny and boom, you got an invite to their birthday. And because of that, I got a lot of experience gawking at other kids' game consoles. It was like stepping into an alternate reality. This was how I thought games were played these days, so to see my peers had this instead.
How does that work?
You're a kid, you own a GameCube. I thought it was pretty straightforward. But no, one of my neighbors had a PlayStation 2 and showed me how a PlayStation 2 owner gets done. They own Shrek 2, Shrek Super Party, Rugrats Royal Ransom, and they live right next to me.
An Xbox owner could never.
I remember fiddling around with these at their house, but they never left a huge impression. And that was because they had one other game. Fucking Christ, Scott. Yes, a SpongeBob game I didn't own. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. No joke, what sold me on this one was the fact it played the full intro to the show. They didn't alter a damn thing. It's ripped right from it. Battle for Bikini Bottom had a cover version of the theme playing during this basic-ass title screen, and from what I played, exploring Bikini Bottom was far more traditional in this game compared to Battle. That one had a bit of destruction caused by the robot outbreak, so what really appealed to me about Revenge of the Flying Dutchman was that it felt like the most true-to-form interpretation of the series. It had the opening, it had the default world. Oh, I really wanted this one for myself. But I guess around this time, the console version was a bit too old to actively find at retailers. It was a 2002 baby, and the difference in quality between 2002 PlayStation 2 games and 2003 ones is staggering. Yeah, babies had a slump that year, so they probably just weren't stocking it anymore, but that wasn't the case for the Game Boy Advance version. Oh, son of a bitch. It turns out Battle for Bikini Bottom on GBA was a follow-up to this game, and by God do I wish it wasn't. I never liked how SpongeBob looked in these titles. He looks fucking gross. Kinda bootleg, honestly. These games were both pretty interchangeable to me. I didn't dislike them, but they sure as hell weren't a part of my daily regimen. I missed a Tuesday somewhere. But listen, while you can infer a lot from my thoughts on these two games, f*** 'em. You can't assume I wasn't a fan of two games built from the same assets, because for Christmas 2004, my grandma got me the SpongeBob SquarePantis movie video game for GameCube. This reused damn near everything from Battle for Bikini Bottom on consoles, but switched things up to make this a unique and fresh experience. And now we only have two playable characters. A much more linear experience here, featuring less exploration than Battle. And that, plus the world's being based on one 90-minute movie compared to seasons upon seasons worth of a show, that made this definitely less interesting than what came before for me. But this was still a great time. It had better gameplay variety with driving levels, slide levels, you could upgrade your attack moves, the boss fights, once again, were stellar. I just loved replaying them. They were so exciting. The unlockables were so rewarding. Like, damn, I earned this. And I think the atmosphere throughout is phenomenal. The ice cream parlor, the rocky desert side, the apocalyptic Bikini Bottom, this trench. I mean, I have never gotten my trench fix like I do from this game. I definitely played Battle for Bikini Bottom more, but it was probably like 60-40. I think the movie game was fun to play as a straightforward video game with cool levels and platforming challenges, but Battle was definitely a better, more fleshed out package overall. I mean, so much of the movie game's content is padded out with repeat what you just did, but now go through rings. But as a kid, this stuff never fazed me. The SpongeBob movie game for Game Boy Advance. Another birthday present in '05. Listen, all I remember about this one was that it wasn't too bad. It was actually a pretty quality time. Quality enough to remember anything about this game?
What game?
I don't know. This one just didn't stick with me as much, even though at the time, I could tell how much better this was than the previous GBA games. I think I was just growing up. I wasn't as enthusiastic about something just because it had SpongeBob on it. I was forming more of my own opinions, my own tastes, and no time was that more apparent than when I finally found this piece of shit. Yeah, I remember going to an EB Games and found a used copy of Revenge of the Flying Dutchman for GameCube. Oh my god, I can have it all to myself! Where's the intro? But where's the intro? That's half the goddamn reason I wanted this game! So, the GameCube discs couldn't possibly fit such a meaty video file on them. I mean, 45 seconds of footage? Nah, man, have you seen this game? We can't fit that. It's already bursting at the seams. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman is one of the emptiest feeling games I've ever played. Every area feels like an ominous ghost town. Oftentimes, there's no music. All you hear is the ambience of the ocean floor, and it's honestly creepy. But when there is music, it's linked to one of the 4 costumes you can wear, not the area you're in. So it's like, oh yeah, the entire world is crumbling around me and death is imminent. So this is a real basic 3D platformer that's just so awkward and slow and weird. I mean, it genuinely feels like they put out the rough draft rather than the finished project. Like, what is this font? What are these menus? What is this glide move? What, SpongeBob flaps like a bird? Look at these visuals. Look at these physics. Oh my god, I finally figured it out. This is what a bad video game is. I spent goddamn hours as a kid delivering food in downtown Bikini Bottom where every street looks the same and you get exact addresses you have to find yourself. Like, dude, the target demographic for your game is womb fresh. They're not gonna want this, nor do they understand it. The rest of the game is so unremarkable, it's honestly remarkable. Most people at this point would throw in the towel. They'd say, yep, this game is bad. I'm not wasting my time on it. Yeah, I played this one a lot, right after I gained standards too. I knew this game was junk at the time, but there was something about it that just drew me back to it time and time again. Just kind of that comfort food guilty pleasure of mine. I think I was just always entranced by this game's early GameCube and PS2 energy. Its unintentional, strange, ominous feeling. While it wasn't good, it also wasn't unplayable, and I would pop it in more often than I'd care to admit. And the next one up was SpongeBob SquarePants Lights Camera Pants. THQ was pumping out a new SpongeBob console game every single year. And believe me, I was paying attention. This was my Madden. But hey, that meant they had to be working on multiple projects at once. So instead of being helmed by the Battle for Bikini Bottom team, this was a THQ Studio Australia joint and was advertised as the first multiplayer SpongeBob game ever. Did I take advantage of this feature? Sure. Yes, the only child with barely any other kids in his neighborhood had a Mario Party style game, and he played it by himself a lot. Oh my god, your sympathy tastes so good! While I did wish I had others to play this with, I still had a blast here. Over time, I've grown more and more impressed with Lights Camera Pants. Like, the basis of this game revolves around everybody wanting to be cast in a Mermaid Man episode, and the minigames are auditions, with your reward for winning a block of them being your character and having the role and appearing in a scene. There's versions of every scene with each playable character in the guest role. It's genuinely a fantastic idea for a party game, and really makes this more than just a Mario Party clone. Couple that with how the minigames themselves are actually really fun, and we may have... Wait, let him finish. Biggest problems with this game are the load times and the amount of minigames. Only about 30, which pales in comparison to other party games. But did 2005 Scott know that? All he knew was isolation. This was all good fun, and I appreciate this game a ton. But obviously, I was more of a single-player guy. Come 2006, the next SpongeBob game was looking to be the best yet. SpongeBob SquarePantis Creature from the Krusty Krab. I fucking hated this game. The advertisements and box art really got me excited. This looked so ambitious, like damn. I get to wreak havoc as a giant plankton? And I get to take down the monster as SpongeBob in a plane? Well, that's all the advertising really showed, but the concept was so badass. ass. And when I saw more of the game, I mean, this looks like Battle for Bikini Bottom. This is gonna be great. I fucking hated this game. Back in the day, if asked what my least favorite game of all time was, this was my immediate response. I mean, first off, this game looks ugly as hell. It uses some assets from previous games, but the animation is atrocious here. This is how SpongeBob talks throughout the whole game. They sort of just stretch his lips randomly. Then they try to do these different art styles, and it's fucking nasty. The first level is a racing segment. You're not racing anybody in particular, you're just trying to get to the end. This goes on for 5 minutes. Then we have a platforming segment that goes on for 30 damn minutes, and is one of the most grueling experiences I had as a kid. It just goes on and on and on. They just keep having you do the same thing over and over again. Hey, fight this enemy, then fight the same enemy again and again and again. This stage feels like it never ends. It's so basic and simple, yet it takes forever to get through because they have you do something and then repeat it like 3 more times. And for a licensed kids game like this, I could look the other way if they at least put you in a cool location from the property like the Fairly Odd Parents game. No, we're in this hot rod world that has nothing to do with SpongeBob. It's not interesting to explore. It doesn't feel like I'm in the show. There's nothing satisfying here. Doesn't help the controls are way floatier and less responsive than Battle for Bikini Bottom. They aren't bad, but they don't feel as tactile. They went for goofier animations, which I guess fits the property, but damn, it doesn't feel great. And the rest of the game has the same exact problems throughout. There's 8 more stages, and none of them feel the greatest to control. They all go on for far too long. This game genuinely frustrated the hell out of me back then, and especially now. Not because it's difficult, it just feels like it loves to waste your time repeating gameplay that already wasn't great to begin with. When it's all said and done, Creature from the Krusty Krab has a few platforming stages, a few vehicle-based ones, and a level based around destroying Bikini Bottom as a giant plankton, which is the best part of the game, which doesn't mean it also isn't way too fucking bullshit long. It's a damn minigame collection where the minigames are artificially lengthened to 30 minutes long a piece, and there's like 5 unique ones. Really bummed me out because the concept here is pretty damn good. Hopping between 3 characters' dreams with them all eventually colliding. But instead of taking advantage of the idea, it feels like the developers used it as an excuse to half-ass everything. Create a game where it's just a hodgepodge of random shit. And the cherry on top of everything was how after I beat everything as a kid, the GameCube version's ending has no audio. I remember saying, screw it, I'll give the cutscene some sound. This isn't the worst game out there, but it genuinely upset me. This was such a huge step back from previous SpongeBob games, and that hurt 10 times more considering how there were some decent ideas here. But none of that mattered because it's obvious this was rushed and unpolished. All definitely just to meet the Wii's launch in 2006. Apparently Nintendo approached THQ about a SpongeBob game for the platform, so they went to the developer of Breakin' the Rules to do it. Why? I liked Breakin' the Rules, but I wouldn't trust my firstborn with it. We've officially entered the intermission in my video gaming years. From 2006 to 2007, I was sort of just coasting along with what I had. That didn't mean I wasn't getting new games, rather I was getting them when I saw them at Big Lots or GameStop for like $5. Like Operation Krabby Patty and the SpongeBob movie on PC. These really weren't anything to write home about, especially Operation Krabby Patty. Well, outside of the cutscenes.
No, where am I gonna get that kind of money?
Prepare the bubble cannon, SpongeBob! They're after me money!
SpongeBob SquarePantis Super Sponge. This was not only a birthday present, but one from a friend. And when you get a video game from somebody other than your parents, I mean, that's a big deal. I remember seeing a friend have this game over at their house and really wanted it, considering I actually had a PS1. Though asking for a game on that console in the mid-2000s, that's a bit tricky. That's like asking for not bubonic plague in 1350. So I don't know where they found it, but after so many years, I think I finally know. Oh! Best way to describe this game is just kinda lame. I wanna go as far as saying it's really fucking bad. I just say it's really bad. There's nothing to this. Other games I had as a kid, when I pop them in again, I can't wait to do certain things. They just left such an impact on me, even if the game itself wasn't all too great. SuperSponge? There's not a single damn thing I want to re-experience. This is such a basic and bland 2D platformer that just doesn't do anything interesting or unique or cool. I remember this was a last resort for me back then.
Fine, I'll eat my leg.
Only pop in when you genuinely have nothing better to do. It may not have frustrated me back then, but it just felt like a waste of time. And that was my PlayStation 1 library. Couldn't live without it.
Much like how I can't live without arsenic.
Atlantis SquarePantis. Yeah, no more GameCube, just strictly Wii and PlayStation 2, alongside GBA and DS versions as well. To be honest, I was starting to get out of my SpongeBob game phase at the time. Maybe that's because the show was starting to go downhill. Well, the games were as well. I don't know, but either way, I felt it was tradition at this point. This was the new SpongeBob game, I had to play it. So this was the final DS game I got that Christmas. I can't say the premise of the title intrigued me. This was just a tie-in with a 40-minute TV special, and a bad one at that. I didn't even like this episode. It was boring. The jokes were lame as hell. It felt like they came up with the title, felt it had to be a big episode, and just let it meander on without any direction or substance. I had to have the game. Atlantis SquarePantis on DS was actually pretty damn impressive. I mean, it's basically a 3D platformer, which was really cool. This was the closest I got to something like Battle for Bikini Bottom on the go. Something I desperately wanted during the GBA days. Though, two things really held this one back for me. First off, the lack of voice acting, hardware limitations, and who gives a shit source material helped make this title feel pretty empty. The levels are all based on locations I couldn't care less about, and the layouts themselves, they're fine, but not really all too interesting to explore. Secondly, the character switching mechanic is probably this game's biggest setback. You always have a partner in the levels, and you can pick who you want to play as beforehand. But stages require a specific combo most of the time, and you can't change characters on the fly. You have to backtrack all the way to the beginning to select the character you need. It's dumb. We made it this far in humanity, and we're still fucking up the Atlantis SquarePantis character switch mechanic. I thought this was a neat little time waster. I appreciated the effort put into it, though it just didn't really grab me. Well, the next game I picked up was the home console version of Atlantis SquarePantis. Yes, now that I had a Wii, I could finally fulfill my destiny to play each of the yearly SpongeBob games.
Oh my god.
I think this was THQ's breaking point with the annual SpongeBob releases. I mean, just the fact this was based on a TV special instead of an original idea made this feel so cheap. This didn't feel like they wanted to make another SpongeBob game. This felt like they scrambled to put one out to meet the quota. The creature from the Krusty Krab developers are back.
To do what to me?
And we have cutscenes that feel like a throwback to the old SpongeBob PC games I played, which was sorta cool. But then when we enter the game,
Wow.
this is unacceptable, man. You can tell how little damn time they had to whip something up. There are 14 levels, which are more so minigames, and a third of them are push the button at the right time. Why else would they put this in the game? It's because they didn't have time to give you actual things to do. It's not even like you're doing this to a rhythm like Dance Dance Revolution. You just push the right buttons. The visuals on screen aren't even interesting. It's just characters walking or standing. It's so goddamn embarrassing. The other levels aren't much better. Another third are these first-person rail shooter segments, and then there's the vehicle stages and two of these overhead puzzle platforming ones. And none of these are special whatsoever. They feel like they're here because they were the easiest and quickest to develop while maintaining a somewhat high-quality presentation, something at least sort of in line with what you'd expect out of a SpongeBob game visually and audibly. The voice actors are all here. Except for Mr. Krabs, who they oftentimes couldn't get the official voice for in-game, so they'd settle for an impersonator. In Atlantis SquarePantis, they don't even do that. They just keep him silent, so he's just jumping around most of the time. But he's a main character here, so he feels more like the group's dog. Like, oh, he's so happy. Look at him. I bought this game one day in June of 2008. I took it home, popped it in, and finished it that same day, which was something I don't remember doing until then. I was shocked. I mean, I still disliked Creature from the Krusty Krab more, but this was obviously a downgrade from that, which is damn impressive. Creature was really ambitious with its core concept. I just think they lost steam as development progressed. It's like they had fun ideas but didn't know how to design the game's levels to actually make them fun. Atlantis SquarePantis, on the other hand, man, this was doomed from the start. It's hard to see any passion present here. Most of the gameplay here is DVD menu level interactivity. Creature from the Krusty Krab really frustrated me with how boring it was, but Atlantis SquarePantis was just flat out embarrassing. One day at Toys R Us, I had just enough cash to pick up a new game, okay? I swear this was where I gave up on SpongeBob. Not the past 8 times, no, this was the one. SpongeBob SquarePants featuring Nicktoons Glops of Doom. All right, so I assume THQ wanted to stick to a yearly SpongeBob game on consoles, but just didn't have one ready for 2008, though they had the next Nicktoons game, which, hey, title it this way. We get our SpongeBob game, and the Nicktoons game has a chance of selling well. Because I think around this time, the concept of being a Nicktoon wasn't as lucrative as it once was. I mean, no, every character not from SpongeBob on this cover, their show was already over by this point. But even as a kid, I caught on to what THQ was trying to do with the titling here. And I think that's mostly why I was interested in picking it up. I wanted to see if it's just another goddamn Nicktoons game. Yeah, I didn't give a damn about this one. Much like Attack of the Toy Bots, it just wasn't interesting. Like, what, do you want to play this? Globs of Doom? Doom Globs? This is it, I was done. I was over trying to play the yearly SpongeBob game. I played real games now. Scott, you lying scum. Hey, well, I was done with the SpongeBob console games. Here we have the handheld game, Drawn to Life SpongeBob SquarePants Edition. Hey, this was a surefire bet. I like Drawn to Life, and I like SpongeBob. I don't remember a single goddamn thing about this game. I think I appreciated the concept of this game far more than the game itself, which was fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. But I think I liked Drawn to Life because I was fantasizing that this was my own video game. You put a SpongeBob skin on it, it's not nearly as personable. Okay, damn it, one last time, and I had a good reason. SpongeBob's Truth or Square. I picked this up used at GameStop, and why did I do that? Because this was developed by Heavy Iron Studios, the same people who made Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game. Oh my god, my childhood! Oh my god, my childhood! I was definitely willing to hop back on the SpongeBob game train for this one. I mean, all I really wanted from the last few was another title that impressed me like with what Heavy Iron did. And with Heavy Iron back, I was finally impressed again. Impressed as to how they didn't do that! Okay, so Truth or Square, much like Atlantis SquarePantis, was based on a TV special. I don't like that. I think it's cheap, especially considering this has like 2% in common with that episode. They're largely different, though that's probably a good thing considering the special was about the gang getting stuck in the vents of the Krusty Krab. Oh boy, I can't wait to use the C button on that. The game instead is about looking back at various memories throughout the show, which is definitely a fun concept, though there's no real feeling of adventure here like in previous games. It's just a handful of stages loosely based on old SpongeBob episodes, and most of them are aesthetically the same as what we saw in Battle for Bikini Bottom, which is pretty much what the whole game feels like, though now we have a way better character animation. But all the music here is ripped directly from those old Heavy Iron titles, or just stock music from the show. We have robots as the main enemies again. This game honestly feels like a soulless repeat of what came before. And that's not even considering the gameplay now. It's just so bland. These levels are unbelievably straightforward. You just keep moving in one direction, defeat all the enemies, hit all the switches. That's it. The camera is a little too close and annoying now, and your moveset isn't nearly as fluid and versatile as previously. This isn't a bad game. It's far better than Creature from the Krusty Krab, Atlantis SquarePantis, Globs of Doom, all of those. It's pretty high quality, all things considered. But I feel the Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game could stand on their own as solid games. Well, this one kind of just feels like they said, F it, it's for kids. Yep, they didn't get far in this one. I kind of just wanted to try it for old time's sake, you know, back when I was 11. But 13-year-old Scott had bigger fish to fry. He was too old for this SpongeBob junk and was ready for something bolder, bigger, more mature. Damn, I'm 13 acting like I'm 14.